In this fresh episode, I am going to present an electric idea that some may even consider shocking. What with the number of dad jokes that I'm dropping in this sparkling episode? Welcome to Unusual Due Diligence. I am your host, Poseidon, god of the sea, and in today's episode, an animate milkshake. In today's seaworthy voyage, I explore 3 key ideas involving ANKR, PrimeBlock, community, and data centers. Wait, is that 4 ideas or 3 ideas? No, that's 3. The trick is realizing PrimeBlock and ANKR are like Optimus Prime is to the Matrix of leadership. In the year 2022, on April 1st, a company known as PrimeBlock exited stealth due to public filings with the SEC to announce intention to perform a SPAC maneuver. That's a maneuver that's not at all similar to other maneuvers. The coverage on the SPAC is available in another episode on the channel, which I will link in the description below. Today's episode isn't really about SPACs, but about Watts. What's on today, you ask? Well, let's talk about community development, but not just for this channel. If you happen to catch my 80th episode, I dedicated it to the people like you. And that means all of you. Community is a critical part of the success of any venture. There's a real easy way to test the veracity of this claim. First, turn off the power to your house and toss your phone somewhere out of reach. Next, take off your shoe. Now, try to sell your shoe to someone on the internet. That is my simple proof on why community matters, but also power, specifically the electric company. It matters a great deal. It's far more profound than just economics. Everyone has a story about community in either a good sense or a bad sense. And I'm not here to discuss community theory, but I am here today to talk about electricity. PrimeBlock has achieved a data center compute capacity of 110 megawatts and 12 facilities across Tennessee, Canada, North Carolina, and Kentucky. First, why should we note this 110 megawatt number? Why is that even listed with the SEC filing? It's a strange humble brag and not exactly a line you'd use at parties. Let's compare that number to other data center projects to get a feel for what it means. Now, this is a tricky question to answer because it does depend on which of the cloud providers and which of their specific data centers we are talking about. What we want to get is an understanding of whether the ANKR-inspired company of PrimeBlock is at their journey. Let's look at some numbers. Here, this Facebook data center is 476,000 square feet and 138 megawatts. This Apple data center is 80 megawatts in North Carolina. Okay, so these numbers are interesting, but what if we look back in time? My contention is that the ANKR story is just beginning. What was, say, the megawatt capacity of Amazon in, 2015? The answer? 500 megawatts for all of Amazon. By 2017, Amazon clipped up over a gigawatt, and that's pretty remarkable because it does show a similar story across the other cloud providers. Let's consider this chart, which has megawatt usage across multiple data center cloud providers and the state of Maine. Let's take a step back now and look at that SEC filing for PrimeBlock again. The specific quote here is, quote, in Q4 2021, PrimeBlock generated $24.4 million of revenue and has over 110 megawatts of installed data center capacity, end quote. What is a megawatt? Well, it's defined as a million watts. So this is a fun bit of information. Here's a really unusual formula for us today. One that kicks out just a fun number that, well, it has you ask some very interesting questions. And here's our first one. Is ANKR's price just a reflection of the relationship to PrimeBlock's realized revenue per watt? Here's what I mean. Since PrimeBlock generated $24.4 million of revenue in Q4 2021, and had 110 megawatts of installed capacity, and we just said a megawatt is 1 million watts, then what you end up is the data that I have on the screen. 24.4 divided by 110 is 22 cents. That's right, 22 cents. At the time of this recording, ANKR continues trading in the nickel to about 8 cent channel range. So ANKR seems to reflect a ratio of somewhere between 25 to 35% of the realized revenue per watt price. Well, that could be a pretty interesting number when PrimeBlock starts becoming publicly traded, because it might be predictive in terms of quarterly revenue. And what would that revenue potential be? Well, remember, I mentioned earlier just one data center for Apple was reported at 80 megawatts, and Amazon had crossed the gigawatt barrier back in 2017. So let's do some simple projections. What might happen to the ANKR price, assuming the 25% ratio holds and PrimeBlock grows to 1.21 gigawatts? That's a subtle Back to the Future reference, by the way. Well, at 1.21 gigawatts, here's what happens to the math. PrimeBlock generates in that scenario 268.4 million per quarter, or just shy of 1.07 billion per year. That's ignoring balance sheet assets, IP, or anything else. That help explains why a number of insiders are looking at PrimeBlock as a billion-dollar-plus operation. In theory, PrimeBlock just needs access to capital and start stacking data center capability. After all, at 22 cents per watt of revenue realized, there's a real incentive there to expand. I'm keenly aware that it's never so simple, so let's just keep poking at the model. If PrimeBlock goes to 1.21 gigawatts, and assuming a cash equivalent of 22 cents per watt of data center capacity, and if we assume ANKR has a 25% relationship to the overall revenue picture here, then what's the realized functional price of ANKR in that scenario? How about we try answering that in this way? Let's ask, what's the price of ANKR per watt of PrimeBlock capacity? Let's use a nickel to make the math easy. What you end up with then is this impossibly small number per watt that reminds me of Shiba. But here's why I think the model may have some justification to it. If you take this impossibly small number and then multiply it by 1.21 gigawatts, you end up at a price for ANKR that just kind of makes sense. And that math, it's on the screen. A price prediction of 55 cents based on a reference to the movie Back to the Future, PrimeBlock data center electricity usage, and broader industry trends. We don't have time to cover it all today, but it's a topic coming soon. The question on community. It will return as I look at the impact of these data centers on what's local, and why I'm going to predict that PrimeBlock hires a community outreach group, just like they did online, for all of their offline activity. Will these predictions hold? Only time will tell. But I can tell you this. This is Unusual Due Diligence. I am Poseidon, god of the sea and animate milkshake. In today's episode, we traveled to the past by way of the future to talk about watts and the ANKR token price. Do you know why 1.21 gigawatts was selected as the number to power a flux capacitor? It's the number to power 10 million light bulbs, which, when you consider there's only 10 billion ANKR tokens, I thought that was a neat reference. Oh, it's also the amount of power in just one bolt of lightning. Make waves, my friend.